What's up, everyone? Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. We're back today with another client interview for you guys. Really excited to have Maahin on with us today. He just finished his full-time 2022 recruiting process. He's a senior right now, and it's actually interesting because, certainly full-time recruiting, we always tell people is much harder than summer internship recruiting, especially if you didn't already have a summer internship in banking during your summer between junior and senior year. And so there's a lot fewer spots. And nonetheless, the man crushed it and was able to secure an offer. And so wanted to get him to come on here, just talk about his experience with you guys, shed some insight on how he was able to do that. Because I'm sure a lot of you who are listening to this probably end up in a similar situation, right? Because a lot of people try to get a summer internship and they can't get one. So I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Happy to be here. So my name is Maahin Gulati. I'm a senior at Trinity College, which is a small liberal arts school in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm an economics major as well as a member of the men's golf team. So I've been on the team for 4 years, been a student athlete here at Trinity. It's a small liberal arts school. It does not get a lot of attention, but at the same time, it's a school where I feel like I've been able to do really well, work really hard, play really well on the golf team, and I've loved every minute of it so far.
That's great, man. So you go to this small liberal arts college. I'm guessing you guys don't have like you guys probably have some alumni, not a whole lot of alumni on Wall Street. It's not like a Wharton or, NYU or Columbia or whatever, right? When did you first realize that you wanted to pursue investment banking?
Yeah, so when I was a sophomore, so this was the spring of 2020, COVID hit. And, in many ways, I thought COVID just gave me an opportunity to have a lot of downtime in school. Obviously, school was transitioning to being online. So the academic world was struggling to figure out how they wanted to go about doing Zoom and stuff like that. So that gave me actually a lot of time to come home and network. And I just love in general talking to people, because ultimately the conversations that I'm able to have give me a better understanding of what this industry looks like or what this company looks like. And I remember I got on the phone with this guy who graduated from Trinity, probably around 25 years old. So graduated a couple of years ago and started his career at Goldman, and actually moved out to London and worked at Goldman in their UK office. And I just remember hearing the conversation, and quite frankly, I didn't know anything about investment banking. And when I got on the phone, he said he worked in investment banking, and he started talking about his transition into private equity. And I sort of stopped him and was like, can you explain what investment banking is, what they do, how they operate? And that 40-minute call was really informative, because I really started to understand what banking looks like and how there's a lot of people that are in college that pursue investment banking and aspire to be in investment banking. And I've always wanted to perform at a high level, whether it's in academics or whether it's in golf or, really anything that I do. And obviously my first job, I wanted to be as opportunistic, as great as it possibly could be. And that conversation really led me to realize that investment banking is something that not only do I want to pursue full-time, but as well as a summer internship. So that's when the spring of 2020, I remember it was April, that is when I really kicked off this journey to try to break into investment banking.
Got it. So that was April of your sophomore year. So towards the tail end of it,
Yep.
Which nowadays, by then, I think a lot of the bulge bracket and elite boutique firms have already started recruiting for their junior summer internship, which for you would be summer 2021.
Exactly.
So like April of 2020, a lot of the firms have either already started, but some have probably even wrapped up their summer 2021 recruiting, right? So then what did you do from that point on? You had this aha moment. It was like, oh, I think I want to do investment banking.
Yeah.
And then what happened next? Because
yeah,
you have this weight all of a sudden on your shoulder, oh my God, I'm so behind, or what were you feeling?
I didn't realize how just fast paced the process really is. I didn't start becoming overwhelmed about the process until probably June or July. It didn't really hit me like this is how it works. I remember a week after I talked to the guy that worked at Goldman, Piper Sandler's internship application closed. I remember that was the first application that I sent, having no idea what it is that I want to do, what is investment bank. Like I had generally a decent idea from that call, but so much that I've learned over the years. So once I had that sort of first application sent, never heard back from HR, like had that experience of going through, okay, like I've applied to one company, I didn't hear back. I realized that the amount of companies that I need to apply to has to increase by 50, right? I need to apply to as many companies as possible, talk to as many people as possible, because everybody from HR was just ignoring me and just not sending back an application or not giving me feedback on my application, things like that. So towards the end of the summer, I started realizing that this is a journey. It's not going to happen in 1 week. It's not going to happen in a month. It's certainly going to take some time. And I remember applying to Goldman in July 1st, their application opened. I applied at like 9 o'clock in the morning, never heard back from a lot of the bulge brackets. And towards the end of the summer thinking, wow, like I've like put in a good 5-6 months of work and nothing's happened so far. And so that was probably, towards the end of the summer, even sort of in the middle, was when I realized like, this is a journey. It's not just going to happen in one day.
Got it. So sounds like in the beginning, just you don't know what you don't know, and I think you didn't understand like the degree of difficulty of breaking into a field like investment banking, and which is understandable. That's probably like the first time you really seriously recruiting for a job, and you probably just think like, yeah, submit my resume, send some application, probably get some callbacks, go through interviews, and then voila, like get the job. In reality, there's so many people applying to these jobs, and people are so qualified that it's really, really hard to stand out, right?
Totally.
So then, like, okay, sounds like you go through sophomore summer, you continue to submit these applications. So you didn't get any interviews.
I didn't get a single interview besides like JP Morgan's hire view, which a lot of like everyone gets. I didn't get a single interview for my junior year summer.
Okay. So then what happened then? Did you like at some point you just say, hey, I just gotta get something else that's in finance, and I'm gonna forget about IB for now and just get what I can, and then
Totally.
come back and figure this out later? Or
Totally. I think that for people that are struggling, that's like the number one thing that they can do. I think having some sort of experience on your resume where, it's the little things. I think, and the little things add up to being sort of the big pictures. I tried to do my Bloomberg certificate. I tried to do, coming from a small school, we don't have a lot of finance classes or investment banking prep classes. So I really went out that summer knowing that my back was against the wall, and did everything that I possibly could to show people that, I can do quote unquote the bare minimum. I can do Wall Street Oasis prep. I can do my Bloomberg certificate. I then went out that summer and got an internship working at a small community bank in Boston called Leader Bank. And I got great experience working on Excel, PowerPoint. I'm able to talk about that in my interviews, that this was something that I got to work on. These were skills that I developed. It was a really small firm, so I was able to work directly with the COO of the bank, which holds a lot of credibility to it. And when you're talking in interviews, it really proves that you know what you're doing, and you're willing to sort of do things at a small scale that will translate to working at a bigger company. So that's what I did in the summer. I put aside the frustration, the sort of the fear of not breaking into investment banking that summer. And I just went out and did everything I possibly could to get experience on my resume. I then took that a step further. And when I got back to school in the fall of 2020, we did not have a golf season. So I was taking 4 classes here at Trinity and was sort of a normal student. I had a lot of free time, wasn't really sure what to do. People were getting COVID left, right, and straight. So I sort of just had to stay in my room and not really leave. And, the fear of the COVID virus and stuff like that. So I decided that I wanted to get more experience. The only thing that'll separate me from everybody else is just not being a normal student. And so I have started applying to investment banking firms, off-cycle internships, seeing what opportunities existed. And I landed this gig at Casa Verde Capital, which is one of the leading venture capital firms in cannabis out in Los Angeles. And that experience completely changed sort of my trajectory looking back at it now, because I was able to work on a team that was really exciting. I was able to work in an industry that was booming and has continued to do really well as we move towards federal legalization. But the main core of that internship was the fact that I was working with ex-investment bankers. So I got the experience of getting grilled every day, working hard, working late on Friday nights. I was working LA time and I live in Boston. So, starting work at 10 o'clock in the morning, going till 10 o'clock at night, balancing 4 classes as well as this internship. I mean, there was a lot of work that needed to happen. And I not only loved the experience, I extended it to be, instead of 3 months, I extended it to 8 because I loved it so much. And that's an experience that I can talk about that really shows that, it's the little things that you do really well. It's going out, getting that experience. It's going out, extending the internship from 3 months to 8 months. Like, that really makes the difference. And I think looking back at my process, the Leader Bank experience as well as Casa Verde are 2 key sort of experiences that I've had that have led me to, finally breaking into investment banking.
Right. So just to be clear for everyone, the Leader thing, that was like a commercial lending internship, right? Yep. When you did that, you basically did that for your sophomore summer.
Correct.
And then for your junior fall is when, actually throughout your entire junior year, really, is when you worked on the VC internship. And that one, sounds like you just did it remotely.
Correct.
Because they're in LA and you are in Boston for school. Right. And then at what point did you then secure your junior summer internship? And what did you do for that?
Yeah, so I kept networking, talking to people through the fall of 2020. Tried to talk to more investment bankers, tried to then really think, okay, I like strategy. I think strategy is interesting. Do I look at consulting? Do I look at maybe, my brothers in tech strategy working in Los Angeles? Would that be an interesting opportunity for me to explore as well, working at a media company in strategy? I had conversations with people, wasn't that interested in really anything else but working in banking. And once again, just the little things. I networked, I got in contact with a Trinity alum who works at BNY Mellon, the Bank of New York Mellon. Had a great conversation with him, applied to their global client management and strategy internship, had a couple of interviews, and was able to secure an internship at BNY Mellon that I just completed this past summer. So my junior year internship. It was not investment banking. It was not 100% what I wanted to do. But I knew that, once again, it's another sort of stepping stone to then being able to break into banking, where I was working at a really great company with a really strong reputation. I was living in New York, so I got to go into the office, meet other people that were not just working at BNY Mellon, but were working at other investment banks. And it just really was an experience that, like I said, was a stepping stone. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the financial industry, seeing what it's like to be in New York, seeing that atmosphere of working at a big bank, a bank that has a great reputation as well. And just that experience was unbelievable. And I really enjoyed it. It just was not the work that I wanted to do. And so I got the opportunity.
Just so people can get a better sense, the global client and strategy team. What do they do exactly? Or what were you working on?
Yeah, so my main project, which I actually thought was really interesting and similar to cannabis, is sort of a part of the business that's going to be growing and very important. I was working on the ESG side of things, looking at what BNY Mellon's investing clients are able to do on a day-to-day basis and how BNY Mellon can support those clients through different products, different solutions. So I was working on a strategic initiative for 10 weeks about what BNY Mellon can do better, how they can be sort of cutting edge, leading edge compared to JP Morgan, compared to Citi, banks like that do a little bit more than BNY Mellon and have known to take bigger risks than BNY Mellon. I love the project because it forced me to talk to everybody in the business, sort of the global client management aspect of, networking and talking to people. And so I was able to really get a good understanding of what BNY Mellon does, what our different lines of business look like, from a global perspective, not just, what's happening in the United States. And that's also tailored because ESG is different based off of where you are in the world. If you're in Europe, it's different than what it's looking like in the United States right now. So that gave me great perspective as to what's happening in ESG. How do I communicate with people? And similar to networking, when I was at BNY Mellon, I was reaching out to the COO of the investment management group. I was reaching out to the head of the global markets group because I wanted to get, I wanted to hear right from, the most important people, what's happening within ESG. And while I really liked the work, it wasn't as analytically focused as I wanted it to be. One of the skill sets that I really need out of college is modeling and technical skills. I wasn't able to do a lot of modeling at BNY Mellon. I wasn't able to put a lot of decks together. I wasn't working on a team that was really focused on sort of valuing companies, which is what I really, really wanted to do. So I gave BNY Mellon certainly the opportunity, first 4 or 5 weeks, and can't talk about enough about how great the experience was. But just wasn't what I wanted to do, and I realized that relatively quickly.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you never really stopped hustling this entire time. Like once you knew you wanted to do banking, you constantly kept yourself busy from the sophomore summer internship in commercial lending, which wasn't really banking, but then doing the VC internship, which I think is like a little bit closer to what you want to do, but still, not quite exactly the same thing. And then you did this BNY Mellon thing, which to me sounds more like kind of like internal consulting for BNY Mellon, but maybe like I would actually argue even a little bit further away from banking than your VC internship in terms of like just relevance to finance, right? And then, but nonetheless, you kept moving, you never stopped, and then you gave the BNY gig kind of a chance. I mean, it's probably like a 10-week internship. You waited until like about halfway through, and now you're halfway through your junior summer.
Yep.
And that's probably, if I remember correctly, that's probably when you came to Wall Street National. Right?
Yeah.
So can we talk about, like, obviously at this point you haven't given up on the dream of breaking into investment banking yet, but like, what made you ultimately come to Wall Street National at that point in time? Like, was that around the time when you first heard about Wall Street National, or had you already known about us for a while? Just never really, considered joining until that point. Like, what was the catalyst, I guess?
Totally. I think one of the big things that, you mentioned hustling, and I never stopped hustling because I had 2 friends from high school that were working specifically in investment banking, and 2 of my closest friends from home. And we were all in New York together, and we all spent, our weekends together and hung out and explored the city. And hearing about their experiences working in investment banking kind of lit a fire in me. Like, I want to break into this. Like, this is something I really want to do. It's not about the money. It's not about like what company they're working for. It's for me, it's about doing the work that I really want to do. And so that's what really lit the fire in me. I think the biggest struggle that I had last year, so it's my summer of 2020, is that you have all these books and guides about teaching you the technicals and teaching you like why banking and things like that. But personally, I'm more of a visual learner. I learn from just having a coach and someone that's there to teach me, and for me to be able to ask questions if I don't understand something. And last year when I was going through this 400 question guide, there was nobody there to answer my questions. Like if I didn't understand an answer, it almost got to the point where I was just memorizing for the sake of memorizing something. And that formula I knew was not successful in interviews. I had a couple like first round interviews that didn't really, it was very behavioral, but still like expressing my why banking is a very important thing to do. And I felt at the bare minimum, I still wasn't really able to do that. So I remember over the summer, I got back from work on a Wednesday or Thursday night, and I was just so focused on starting and like figuring out how I want to, attack this problem of breaking into banking. And I remember going on a YouTube video, and there was an ad, and the ad was Wall Street Mastermind. And I started thinking to myself, all right, like, if I really want to do this, I got to put everything I have into it. And I know this formula right now is not working. So I either can be stupid and continue doing the same thing that didn't work last year, or I can try something new and try a different strategy. And ultimately, that is what I remember. It was around July. I came home from New York to Boston on the 3rd of July to be with my family. And I remember talking to my dad and being like, is this something that, I really want to do? And my dad looked at me and said, if you want to break into investment banking, I think this is the exact program for you. And that's when I reached out to Alex, and Alex and I had a conversation. We talked about it. We went back and forth for a couple of days, and ultimately I made the decision to join Wall Street Mastermind. And it has been a really rewarding and a really amazing experience that I can't stop speaking about. So that's part of why I'm here.
That's awesome, man. I mean, there's so much that I want to unpack there. So, I mean, the first thing is you talked about just being in New York with your two closest friends in the summer, and they were in banking and you were not. And that obviously is like a huge motivation for you. Um, and I think it's great that you realize that while you're hanging out with them. And this is why it's like surrounding ourselves with the right people is so important. People say like, "Hey, you're the average of 5 people you spend the most time with." It's kind of true, right? And like, if all of your friends are like ambitious, motivated, successful individuals, and you're hanging out with them all day long, like it's hard for you to not be ambitious and motivated and successful yourself. Otherwise, eventually you'll probably just stop being friends, right? But also the other thing is like, as someone who's quite a bit older, I'm in my mid 30s now. I know so many people who who are my age, who are like kind of a little bit bitter because they see their friends from way back in the days, maybe their high school buddies or college buddies, and they used to be good friends, and then at some point in their trajectory, it kind of diverged, right? Like their buddies ended up doing better than they did, and in the beginning, the gap doesn't really seem that big, like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, he started in investment banking and I started in accounting. Let's say I started in Big Four accounting. Nothing against accounting, right? But like, great job. But then like the problem is like over time that gap widens because the slope of the trajectory is totally different. The exit opportunities are totally different. The amount of money you're making is totally different. Not that the money's like the end all be all, but it's just one of the many ways to, I guess, keep score or measure success, right? Like, and so as that gap widens, people start thinking like, that guy's not that much better than me. Like, we used to be like BFFs or whatever, right? It's like, what happened? And it's just a horrible feeling, And it's just like, I hate to see like people that I know get to a certain point in life and not be satisfied with where they are, and then they're wondering like, oh, woulda, coulda, shoulda, or whatever, right? And people like to rationalize to themselves like, well, that guy just got lucky, or I was so unlucky, or this or that. But it's like, no, like, yes, there's luck in everything, but you got to create your own luck, and you got to like do what's necessary to put yourself in the right position to like be in the right place at the right time. That's what luck is, right? Like you did all these things along the way. You kept hustling and you were making moves, and even though you couldn't quite figure it out, but like when push came to shove and it was go time, it was like, hey, it's junior summer, full-time recruiting is coming up. You decide to go out and get help.
Yep.
Right? And now you come out the other side and you're working investment banking, the same thing that your buddies are doing, and you don't have to end up 5, 10, 15 years down the road wondering like, oh, what happened, or oh, that was the job that got away, or whatever, or guys like, oh, that was the girl that I never asked out, and wonder like what could have been. It's like, it's too late, right? And you just like, you can't live life with these regrets. It's just not like the way to be happy, right? So I think like that's I think that's really cool that your friends motivated you, but also that you actually went out and did something about it, right? And I think, and then the other thing that you said that's really awesome is like, I think is you said, I can either be stupid and just keep doing what I've been doing, but it's clearly not working, or I can try something new. A lot of times people are just so stubborn, and it's just like, you can call it stubbornness or you can call it being like just optimistic would be like a good way of putting it. Like people always want to think like, hey, as long as I work hard, like I can I can get there eventually, right? And then, like I think that's like a lot of what's been told to us. And obviously working hard is like, I would say working hard is a prerequisite. Like if you don't work hard, there is nothing else to talk about, right? But at the same time, it's also a fantasy to just say, if I just work hard, I can make it. Like I know so many people who work so hard and they don't accomplish their goals. Like if I when I was in elementary school, I wanted to become, my dream was to become an NBA basketball player. I could tell you I could have worked my ass off and I probably would have never made it to the NBA, right? Not just because of I'm not athletic enough, but also like I don't have the right coaches and resources. I didn't play AAU basketball. I don't like I'm just not in the right environment, right? And my parents didn't understand what it took for their kids to make it to the NBA either, right? And so it's like I didn't have the right resources and the help around me. But the point is like working hard alone is not enough, and just telling yourself everything's gonna be fine as long as I just keep doing what I'm doing. Like no, if what you've been doing hasn't been working, you need to try something else. Like the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, but expect a different result, right? And so sometimes it's hard for people to like it's almost like admit it, like, oh yeah, I need help because they view it as like a sign of weakness. But I actually think that it's a sign of strength. It's a sign that you're secure enough in yourself to acknowledge that hey, everybody needs help. And I think like for you, it was probably easier because you being a um, you being an athlete playing, collegiate golf, like you're used to having coaches, right? I think that's the other thing you mentioned is like I'm a visual learner, can't just like read a book and understand. It's just like, hey, if you want to play collegiate golf, you're not gonna just go like buy a book on how to swing a golf club and then like say, oh yeah, this is how I'm gonna learn. Like you had to actually go and learn from a coach who knows how to play the game. But not only that, but like knows how to coach, right? Like knowing how to play the game and knowing how to coach is actually two different things, right? But all successful athletes have coaches, right? Um, all the Olympians have coaches, right? If you're a casual athlete, you probably don't need a coach, right? But like when we look at investment banking, we look at breaking into investment banking, which I kind of view like the analogy is like investment banking is the pinnacle of kind of the finance profession. Like if you want to work in financial services, investment banking is kind of like considered the best place to start, right? So you're trying to beat out all these other people. You're trying to become like the Olympian level finance person. There's no reason why like getting coaching to get to that place is like a weird thing, or it's like it's not, people aren't used to seeing it yet because I think like we're one of the first coaching programs out there for this industry, even though like this exists for a lot of other industries. Like there's executive coaches, right? There's like college admissions and MBA admissions consultants. It's kind of a similar idea. Like you have people that are experts coaching you. Hasn't really come into investment banking yet until the last few years since we come onto the scene. But I think that in the future, this is going to become the norm, right? We're just like, you're going to have coaches for everything. It's just, there's no doubt that when you have a coach or when you don't have a coach, you're going to do better if you have a coach, right? Not because you're dumb, but just because your coach has more experience. That's what coaches are for, right? So I just think that the last thing I know I'm like talking a lot here, but like the last thought that I have when I heard what you just said is like your dad is like, I don't know if you know this, but your dad sounds like, I mean, he was super supportive of just you pursuing your dreams and like even saying, hey, yeah, you should do this program. Not every parent is actually like that because we talk to so many students, right? A lot of parents, they don't understand what investment banking is. First of all, like I don't know what your dad does for work, but a lot of parents don't know what investment banking is. They don't know why it's so important that you have to get into investment banking. Like, why not just go back to BNY? Like, some parents will say that, right? But why not just go into consulting? Why not go into strategy? Why not go do something else? What's the big deal? And also, a lot of parents, again, the concept of career coaching is
Yeah.
not something that they've heard of before and that they're not familiar with. And so, when it's a foreign concept, we hear parents say this all the time to their kids. It's like, well, why do you even need that? Why can't you just do it on your own? Or like, their thought is, I didn't have any help getting whatever job I got. Why do you
Mhm.
need help? Right. And so I think it's just like, I'm sure you thanked your dad already, but it's like, I would not take that for granted because your dad, it sounds like he's just super supportive type, which is great. Cause it's like, I feel like behind every successful person, there's like really supportive people behind them, whether it's like their family, their friends, their spouse, whoever, their partners, right? And we all need that, like none of us really ever, as much as we like to think that, oh yeah, we take all the credit, it's all our hard work and whatever. Like, I don't think anyone really ever becomes super successful doing it 100% on their own. Like, we
Mhm.
all have help in some way, shape, or form along the way, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I'll take this 30 seconds to a minute just to say, obviously you mentioned I got tremendous support from my parents and my brother. There's the four of us in the family. And just to have their support in the last month and a half, but not even the last month and a half since I've been doing Wall Street Mastermind, the last 2 years, motivating me. I obviously had ups, I obviously had downs, but helping me throughout the downs a lot more than, obviously the highs. It was really motivating and really allowed me to just keep pushing. I remember when I was talking to my dad about doing Wall Street Mastermind. Is it worth it? It's an investment. Is it really worth it? And I remember him saying, if you don't try, you won't know. And ultimately, like, the goal obviously is to break it into investment banking. But I'm sure we'll talk about this later. I learned so much in the last month and a half that even if things didn't end up working out, I'm so much more knowledgeable than I was a month and a half ago about finance, about the way banking works. And that is valuable as well. So the support that I had from my family, there are obviously a lot of people out there that have that. There are obviously a lot of people out there that don't. So just having that support really was the stepping stone that made me just want to do this and made me want to prove to not only myself, my family, everybody that, you can come from a small school, you can come from a non-target and ultimately break into banking.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I'm guessing first person you told when you got your job was probably your dad.
Mom didn't pick up, but yeah, dad, dad.
Okay, mom and dad. I mean, usually those are the first people that people call. So, like, what did your parents say when they found out?
Yeah, I mean, my parents were in awe. They were so excited. They were so happy. There was definitely some tears that were shed on the call, which is obviously awesome. But they knew how hard I worked. They knew, like I said, it was a journey. It was not something that just happened. They knew the adversity that I had been through in the last 2 years, and they were really proud of just me committing to something. I've always thought that if I commit to something, if I really put my mind into something, I can really accomplish anything. So to see that happen, they were so excited for me, which was
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I've become a dad myself in the last 2 years. My daughter actually turns 2 in a couple days here, and so I have 2 kids now, and so I can relate a lot more to what it feels like to be a dad. Like, I can kind of visualize, um, someday when my kids are older and there's a goal that they set that they really, really want very badly. And then to see them go through the struggle, fail a couple times, not give up, and eventually get it. Um, I mean, even as I'm saying that now, like, I'm kind of tearing up a little bit. It's like, there are very few things in life that probably feel better than that. It's like seeing your children succeed as something that they not just like something that just fell in their lap, but like something that they had to like really fight for. Right. I
Yeah,
think that's like probably like a super proud moment for them, and so that's awesome.
yeah.
Especially given how supportive they are of you. I'm sure. I'm sure it's very fulfilling for them as well. Um, so let's I don't want to cry on this, but let me let's talk about like your time in Wall Street Mastermind a little bit, because obviously, you tried a bunch of stuff on your own. You kept hustling, didn't really, see the results you want for, I guess, like, what, 12 to 15 months, from when you first started thinking about IB. And so then you come to Wall Street Mastermind in July, which is really only 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And so talk about the last 2 months. Like,
Yeah.
what was that like? You know, what did you do? What was different
Mhm.
about your approach once you got into Wall Street Mastermind versus what you were doing on your own before? And like, people always ask us, like, can I just do this on my own? Like, what's the difference? Right? Like, what would you say to those people who have that question? Because from the outside looking in, I think until you've actually gone through the program, it's really hard to imagine, like, I mean, how different can this be?
Yeah.
Right. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, short answer, it's totally different. Just having the resources available at all times to communicate with Sam, with other people on the team, to just have them available at your disposal at just all times is different than trying to crank through 400 questions to memorize. I think the number one thing, when I started this program, the modules that are designed are what make the difference. The ability to sort of start with behaviorals, understand why are you really doing this? Why do you really want to work for this company? Answering basic questions like that are actually hard to answer. The program does a really good job about you thinking about why you were making this push to investment banking. Obviously, for me, I personally think that I did well in the behaviorals. I'm good on my feet. I like to talk to people. I love networking. So I never thought that the behaviorals were difficult. Obviously, some questions like, pitch me a stock, or like, tell me about what's happening in this industry. Like, they can be challenging at times, but you just have to be up to date on what you're reading in the news, what's happening in the markets on a day-to-day basis. And that stuff in the program that they teach you, and they constantly are reiterating that you need to do this, you need to do this. And it just sort of programs in your brain. From July until today, I can confidently say that I spend at least 10 minutes reading the morning brew or reading what's on CNBC, and just doing little things like that because it's just so embedded in what this program is teaching. So that was one side of it. And then obviously for me, the focus was technicals. The focus was understanding how to navigate those tricky questions, because I had no prior experience, no classes, no nothing on what these questions were and where these questions were frankly coming from. No modeling, no nothing, like just kind of stone cold coming in, just really not having any idea. And I think this, having a coach, whether it's a golf coach or whether it's a tutor, obviously this is more of a tutor, but having a coach that is able to, has the experience, one has the credible experience, right, has been in investment banking, knows what they're talking about, is able to really explain things in a very simple way. You won't find that in the 400 question guide. You won't find that in many other programs. So this, right off the bat, quite different. I think as you're going through the technical modules, or you're going through the sort of the learning of things, you're going to have questions. You're going to struggle at times. So having someone to reach out to on Slack that they can, they're able to respond in seconds, or other people. I think the other beauty of this program is the fact that there's so many kids that are in the same boat as I am. And the Slack group chat is just constantly buzzing with people asking questions about behaviorals, people asking questions about technicals, people just asking questions about the process in general. You really feel like you're a part of this community that really is trying to all achieve the same goal. And ultimately, like, having more people that, you always think that you're the only one that's struggling, but then when you're actually in a community of people that are all working for the same goal,
Yeah.
it makes you feel like you're a part of something, and that you're able to work with each other to accomplish that goal. So right off the bat, I knew that this was something that I wanted to be a part of, that this is something that would quite frankly change my trajectory. And everything is there. Everything's laid out for you. It's just on you, or on the person, to work really hard, get through all the modules as quickly as possible, but not as quickly as possible. Go over them again. They're all available for you at all times. And that's what I did. I would work at BNY Mellon. I would come home. I would study. I would go to the office hours. I would read the Slacks to just constantly be thinking about behaviorals and technicals. And certainly in the last 2 months, that was the difference maker. And if I didn't do this program, I would not have broken into banking.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think, one big difference you mentioned was like, well, you can read the guides, and when you did do that before,
Yeah.
obviously along the way as you're reading the guides, and everyone runs into this, you're gonna have questions. You're gonna have a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
What did you used to do when you had a question? I'm curious. Like, did you just go on Google and type in whatever question you had, or
Yeah.
did you have someone you could ask? But like, how did you used to handle that?
Yeah, quite frankly, I would try to go on YouTube and put in the exact question. I didn't want to spend 20 minutes on one question.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, they didn't really answer the question. They kind of gave the whole holistic picture of what's happening, and it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. And I would just move on to the next question. I would
Right.
think, like, what are the chances I get this question on the interview? All right, let's move on to the next one. And I think I said this earlier, I'm a visual learner. When you're working on the modules and you're going through this process, right, you can visually see what the three financial statements look like, how they all connect to each other. A basic investment banking question, one that was very hard for me to understand because I just don't like reading words and trying to memorize them, but just being able to see what's happening on a paper made the whole difference. So, the question was about, asking questions or what did I do during that time? I wasn't able to do anything. I would move on to the next one. I was sort of digging this hole for myself where every question I didn't understand, I would skip and just pray that didn't come up in an interview.
Yeah, I think like the difference is there's a lot of information online, but to be able to find like the exact answer to the precise question that you have in that moment is harder than you think, right?
Yeah.
Because you can type whatever question you want into Google or into YouTube. The algorithm has to like understand what it is that you're looking for and then
Yeah.
serve up like the exact result that maybe has an answer. And let's say you get a YouTube video
Yeah.
and it's 20 minutes, and then you don't know where in that video actually talks about the answer that you're looking for, if it's even in there at all. And like you said, you could go through and watch the video, or you could open the first 10 search results on Google and read through all of them, and then realize like, oh, I still don't get it. And then at that point, you're like, well, I guess
What do
there's
I
all
do?
I can do. So I'll just move on and fingers crossed, hope it doesn't get asked. Versus, this is where the human element comes in, right? Like if you actually have a coach where you can have a conversation with them, you can ask the exact question that you have, and they can just give you the exact answer that you're looking for to that question because you're talking to a human being. The same question that you have, you can resolve it in like 30 seconds.
Speed's the big one too. Like you not only do you get the exact answer, but you also get it in 30 seconds.
And you might think that's not a lot, like that's not a big deal, but think about how many questions you're gonna have along the way.
It's a
Right?
huge deal.
Not just technical. You're gonna have questions about technical. You're gonna have questions about a behavioral answer. You're gonna have questions about, oh my God, networking. A banker sent me this email. How do I respond? You're gonna have like all sorts of questions, right? And if you just save 20, 30 minutes, an hour every single time you had a question, I mean, think about that. And then also, not even just saving time, but the difference between getting the answer you need versus spending all that time and not getting the answer that you need, right? For you too, like coming to us in July, like we knew that, hey, full-time recruiting was probably going to start in August because that's usually when it starts, right? Like most of these banks, they start their internship in June. It's a 10-week internship, which takes you to about like early to mid-August. That's when they give the return offers to their successful interns. And then if they have any spots left, then they go out and try to fill the last like onesie, twosies with people like you, right? And so we knew you only had like probably a month or less
Yep.
to get to the place where you're absolutely ready to crush those interviews. And that's just, there is no time to waste, right? Even if you were recruiting for summer internships, like nowadays, summer internships, we talked about this earlier, it starts so early.
Yeah.
more often than not, by the time people realize they want to do banking, and by the time people realize how the timeline works, it's like, oh, I'm already behind. Or like, oh, I don't have that much time anymore. Oh, you're saying I still need to go out and get internships and build up my resume. I still need to network. I still need to do interview prep. I still need to keep up my grades. I'm still a student athlete or whatever extracurriculars I'm involved in. Like, you guys are busy, right? And it's just like, how can you make the most out of the time that you have, like the limited amount of time that you have,
Mhm.
not waste time spinning your wheels or doing a lot of trial and error or experimenting like, oh, maybe I'll try this. Oh, that didn't work. Well, now let me go try this. Now let me send this email. Oh, they didn't respond. I wonder what's wrong with it. I don't really know. Now let me try this other thing. It's just like you got blindfolds on, and versus like if you just had a map or a GPS that told you like turn right here, turn left here, like how much faster would you get to your destination?
Mhm.
Right? So that's like the best analogy I can give in terms of like what is the actual difference? Like,
Yeah.
can you get to your destination eventually? Yeah, you might be able to, maybe, maybe not, but it'll take a lot longer.
Yeah.
And you might run out of time. You're not just trying to get to the destination with banking recruiting, you're trying to get there before time runs out, before the recruiting process is over, before all the offers get taken.
Yeah.
So there's a time constraint that we're working with there.
Yeah. And I remember some of the conversations that I had early networking, like probably like end of July, early mid-July, talking to bankers. And, the theme that I got in the call is that it's going to be hard. It was going to be hard. And I knew that it was going to be hard. And I just did my best to be prepared because I knew that there were going to be opportunities available. And I knew that there might not have been a lot of time, but I knew that there was going to be some bank out there that wanted an analyst, and that if I had the opportunity, I would get it. And I think another big thing is like, I didn't have time. I didn't have a lot of time. So I wanted to cast my net as wide as possible. I didn't want to just look at bulge bracket banks in New York. I wanted to, quite literally go anywhere to have the opportunity to work in banking, whether it was a small shop, a boutique, a middle market, a bulge, wherever I got the experience, I just wanted to get it. And I knew in the back of my mind that if it wasn't one of the best, it would be second best or third best. And it would just be an experience that I would have, another stepping stone, in my story. So that's sort of the mindset that I had. And my back was certainly against the wall, and it sort of feels good to come out on the other side.
The bankers that told you it was going to be hard,
Yeah.
why did they say it was going to be hard? Or like, what was
Yeah.
the reason?
Yeah. It's because there was such a small window of time, right? Like what happened was that you mentioned this, the summer analysts end a week later, depending upon the HR system, like a week later, maybe max 2 weeks later, every one of the interns has a return offer. And then they have another week where they probably accept the return offers, decline the return offers, whatever they want to do. And then probably 2 weeks after that, there's this tiny little window where HR really figures out, all right, like this group has 2 spots, this group has 0 spots, this group has 1 spot. And then it's just for me, a kid like me that's trying to break into banking, it's quite frankly like, talking to the right people, being prepared, and just knowing that I'm going to get only so many opportunities, and just being, on top of everything. So that's why it made it really tough, is because there was such a small, tiny little window. And I knew that if it was one opportunity, I needed to make that opportunity count. If it was 5, I needed to make all 5 count. So that's sort of the mindset that I had.
Yeah, and so I think you touched on two really good points there. One is it's a small window for full-time
Yeah.
recruiting, much smaller than summer recruiting, which is pretty
Yeah.
right. And the other thing is there's way fewer spots, right? Probably like 90% plus of the spots have already been filled by the summer interns. So you're fighting for the last couple spots. Any group that has an opening is only going to have no more than probably 1 or 2, right?
Sure.
And then on top of that, I think the last thing is a lot of people that you're going to be competing against for those spots, they did do a summer internship in
Yep.
investment banking,
Yeah.
maybe at like a slightly smaller bank than the one that they're interviewing for now, which is why they're trying to make that move. But still, technically, they have more relevant experience than you have,
Mhm.
right? And so those are all things that you have to overcome and still make yourself stand out and give the banks a reason to hire someone like you who did, strategy over the summer as opposed to straight up investment banking, right?
Mhm.
So I guess like maybe like one piece of advice that you have for people of like, how were you able to overcome the fact that you didn't have a summer internship in banking, whereas a lot of people that were going for those jobs against you did have that internship? Like, was there something that really helped you there?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the constant networking that I did with talking to people is what really helped me at the end of the day. I started this conversation by saying I go to a small liberal arts school in Hartford, Connecticut. We have a great alumni network, a great presence on Wall Street, but we're not a target school. So when HR sees a Trinity kid versus a Wharton kid or a Harvard kid, right, the attention isn't on Trinity. So what do you have to do? How do you overcome that? You overcome that by talking to people that went to Trinity that are on those teams. You do that by really developing a connection with them, because ultimately that's how my resume got pulled. And if it weren't for the hundreds of conversations and networking calls where I was asking the same questions just at a different firm, if I didn't have those calls, that opportunity would not have existed at the bank that I'm working for next year. And so I think the one piece of advice that I can give people is, when you don't think a networking call is important, it is. Every call is important, because you never are going to know when an opportunity is going to arise from that call.
Yeah.
So if it's 30 minutes, if it's 15 minutes, it's a Friday at 5 o'clock, you want to do something with your friends or something like that, you just don't really want to do it, because ultimately every conversation you have is going to teach you a little bit more about banking. It's going to teach you a little bit more about the firm, about that guy or that girl. And it's ultimately going to give you a better experience and a better perspective of what my goal is. And that for me was the number one thing. And I remember a year ago, my mom was like, you're constantly talking to these bankers. Like, are you doing the right thing? Hell yeah. Like, I talked to almost like 150 to 200 people just this last probably 6 or 7 months of just recruiting. Every conversation that I had has led me to the opportunity that I now have, and fully believe that that's the number one thing that people can do. And it's so simple and so easy to do.
Right, right. Yeah, networking is hugely important, no doubt. I mean, especially if you don't go to like a Uber Target school where people hire you no matter what or whatever. Well, not no matter what, but like it's a lot easier, right? Um, like if you're a non-target student, you got to network. There's
Yeah.
no way, right? Or in fact, not even just non-target student. If you have any sort of disadvantage, lack of experience, lack of summer internship in IB, lower GPA, non-target school, whatever it is, like networking is probably the only way to overcome that when it comes to getting your resume selected, right? So absolutely agree with that. I guess, can we tell people like ultimately, okay, so after you've gone through all this, we've been probably teasing this for a long time now. Like, what's the successful outcome that you got in the end? That
Yeah.
and how do you feel about it?
Yeah. So I got accepted to work at Cowen in their San Francisco office, working in their consumer group. The San Francisco office typically focuses on cannabis. So I will most likely be working on that team, still to TBD, but San Francisco gives a good hint that it's going to be focusing on cannabis. So I'm super excited. I had the internship in cannabis at Casa Verde, which really sort of set me up for this opportunity. I think Cowen right now, being one of the only investment banks on the street that is dealing with cannabis and working with cannabis, makes it a really exciting time to be on this team. There's a ton of tailwind in the industry, and certainly there's going to be once marijuana is federally legalized, there's going to be so much opportunity. And working in a relationship-based industry, I think Cowen's like really set up and really sort of positioned well to do great things with some of the biggest and the best cannabis companies in the world. So I'm super excited to get started. I have a year, so certainly going to enjoy my senior year, and don't take any minute for granted. But it's such a rewarding and such a relieving feeling from when I was in July and where I am now, September 24th today. So can't thank Sam enough, can't thank the team enough. Without them, I wouldn't be in this position, and I truly mean that from certainly the bottom of my heart. Like, I would not be in this position if it weren't for this program and weren't for having those difficult conversations of how do I change my strategy. And I'm very lucky, but I'm very blessed for this opportunity.
No, I mean, thank you for the kind words. I mean, I think that honestly, you know this as an athlete, like we kind of view our relationship with our students as like a coach and athlete relationship, right? Like you are the athlete, we're the coach, and at the end of the day, when you win the game or you win the match, the athlete deserves most of the credit because you're the one who's got to go out there and practice and do the reps and play the game and actually execute on game day, right? As the coach, we have a small part to play in it too. We got to do the drills with you. We got to give you feedback, correct your form. We got to like give you the best game plan, best strategy so that you know what you should be doing when you go out there. But sometimes, you know this, some athletes, you give them the best game plan, they go out there, they don't choke, they choke or they don't execute, right?
Yeah.
Whereas some others, they have the exact same coach, exact same strategies, and they go out there and they get different results, right? Like Tom Brady, like probably doesn't matter who his coach is, he's gonna win no matter where he goes, right? You put a different quarterback on his old team, they're not going to the Super Bowl, right? And so, my point is, I think you absolutely deserve all the success that you have. I mean, just given how hard you've been working for, the last year and a half since you started thinking about IB, and you never really stopped, you never quit, and you weren't like, you didn't let your ego get in the way, and you weren't too proud to go out and get help and get coaching, and so you did all the things you had to do, and you stayed motivated, and then in the end you got this phenomenal outcome. Like I absolutely agree with you. I think it's really exciting to be at a place like Cowan in their consumer group, um, where you're getting in on the ground floor of what's going to be a huge industry, right? You guys have this first mover advantage. It's cool that actually Cowan is so progressive and that they had the foresight to invest in this area and really go after this market while it's still relatively nascent. Because someday when this is a huge market, like if you guys are the top dog, like you guys have all the deals, right? You guys have the track record, you guys have all the relationships, then that's just like, that's really hard to overcome in banking. I'll just put it that way, right? Like once someone has built up a franchise, like when I worked at MS Tech, us, Goldman, Catalyst, we were like the three top tech groups. And that was like probably 15 years ago at this point, right? 15 years later, as I'm helping students recruit for banking, for the ones that want to go into tech banking, guess who are the top dogs? Still Goldman, Morgan, and Catalyst. It hasn't changed in 15 years. Like bankers have moved around from firm to firm, like executives at these firms have changed jobs, and like the economy has gone up and down, like recession, bull run, whatever, but the top firms in that space are still the same firms. It's like really really hard to like displace them once they're just like so entrenched, right? And I think it's the same thing for cannabis. It's like, I mean, right now it's a greenfield opportunity, but like sounds like you guys are one of the only games in town, so that's a great place to be, right? And who knows what happens. A lot of people leave banking after 2 years. If all goes well, like you might be there for a long time,
Yeah.
right? And if you can make it all the way up to MD in a group that's very successful, in a huge market industry where there's going to be a lot of deal activity, I think there's going to be a ton of capital raises, a ton of consolidation. Um, that's a good spot to be in. So
Definitely excited. Yeah.
I'm excited for you, man. I think it's going to be great. Obviously, again, you deserve all the success in the world. So huge congrats again.
Thank
Um,
you.
guys, for those of you who are still listening, like if you're in a similar situation, like maybe you've been trying to get into banking on your own, whatever you've been doing hasn't really worked. It's time to make a change, right? Maybe you couldn't get a summer internship on your own, but you're not ready to give up yet, right? You don't want to quit yet, and this is still your dream job, and you want to go for full-time recruiting, or maybe even if you're already a senior or like you're a recent grad, even like we've helped even students with that type of profile, where most people would say, you know what, you should forget about it, and we've helped people get in that way. We've helped people lateral in after they graduated, went into accounting, went into valuation, went into corporate development, and then they say, oh, I still want to do banking. Like I would say it's never too late to go into banking unless you're like at least 5 or 10 years out of school already. right? Like then it might be a little bit late, but like there's also the MBA route, right? But bottom line is, if you're not ready to give up on this yet, and whatever you've been doing hasn't been working, stop being so stubborn. Get some freaking help. Like we're here for you, right? And you don't have to work with us if you don't want to. Um, but at a minimum, like talk to people who have gone through the program and see like what it was like for them, and then decide for yourself if it's a good fit for you. In fact, like you can actually book virtual coffee chats with alumni in the Wall Street Mastermind program who have already recruited. So these are like current upperclassmen. They've gotten offers from the top bank. Um, they'll just do a networking call with you and just like talk about their experience, how they get in. You can ask them whatever questions you want, get some advice. You can ask them about Wall Street Mastermind if you want to, or don't if you don't want to. It doesn't matter. But like, you can talk to them first, and then like after that, if you still want to talk to us, then we're happy to talk to you, right? If you don't want to talk to us, it's totally cool. So this is like a no obligation, very laid back networking call, like free networking opportunity. If you guys are interested in that, you can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The streets abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply, and book this free virtual coffee chat, and I have this conversation. And either way, at a minimum, just walk away with some advice that you can go implement on your own. So anyway, we look forward to talking to you. We're going to wrap things up here. I already went way over time, but this is a good conversation.
Totally worth it.
But Ma, I want to thank you for really taking the time to just like share your story, talk to us about how you got to where you are today. I think it's going to benefit a lot of people. And again, can't wait to see all the success that you have ahead of you. Obviously, don't be a stranger. If you need help with anything, you know how to find us. And just congrats again, man.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, that'll be it for this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future, and we'll talk soon. All right. Bye.